We've got quite a few people expected this evening, so it will take us a while just to admit everybody.
So while we're waiting for people to turn up, why don't we say hi and introductions in the chat?
Yeah,
where you're dialing in. I would say, what weather is it with you today? But it's dark, so that's irrelevant.
Yeah,
I'm dialing in from Stockport, so
feel free to put your contact details in as well if you'd like to share contact with people. Welcome everyone who's connecting. We will be starting in a few moments. We're just got a few more people joining us.
Someone. So I'm just thinking I might get a little bit distracted by Rachel, so I have to focus somewhere else than the sketch notes. That'd be interesting to see what emerges.
Welcome everyone. I can see a few more people joining. We're just admitting people at the moment. Welcome to this session on change, and we will be starting in a few moments. Feel free to intro yourselves and pop your details in the chat if you'd like to connect. Hi Sammy, welcome. Hi Helen, nice to have you with us again. I see you just having a little sip of tea there. We've got some familiar faces and some new faces this evening, which is always nice to see. For those of you who can see Rachel Burnham's screen, you can see that she's got her paper and pens at the ready. She's going to be sketchnoting the session this evening, which is great because they're always really brilliant records of what we've discussed that you can take away and have a look at afterwards. So really great to have Rachel with us. Okay, I'll just leave it another 30 seconds or so and then we'll make a start so that we're on time.
Everyone's been here before, I can tell they've all put their mute on. We're all used to this technology now, unlike it a year and a half ago.
Yeah. So thanks everyone that's introduced themselves. I think we should kick off and then other people can join us as they're arriving. So for those that haven't met me before, I'm Liz Needham and I lead on organisational development for the CIPD Manchester branch. We're a pretty big branch. We've got quite a few of the committee with us tonight, so I will just get them to say hello shortly. But this CIPD OD practitioner group is really about people who are working in OD, having a space where we can come and look at new things that are coming out, share our experience and really get some support as well with some of the challenges that we have in OD at the moment. I think it's a challenging time, whatever organisation you're in. This is the second session in a whole series we're doing around leadership. So we had an ethical leadership session last month, and this month we're looking at the hot topic of change, which was never more relevant. And I'm really excited to hear from Rebecca about this new change model that she's been having a look at, which we'll talk about shortly. So before we start, I just want the volunteers, the CIPD volunteers, I'll just go through your names. If you can just unmic yourself, say hello so that people know who you are. So we have supporting us tonight, Jane Hanson.
Sorry, wasn't quite ready then. Hi everyone, I'm Jane, Ambassador for CIPD.
Lovely, thanks Jane. We've got Stephen Berry.
Hi everybody, nice to see everyone. I'm a committee member for the branch.
We have Rebecca Westaway.
Hello everybody, I'm Rebecca and I'm branch administrator and lead on ambassador engagement.
Thanks Rebecca. We have Rachel Burnham, who is sketchnoting for us amongst other things.
Hi everybody, lovely to see so many people here. I'm the chair of CIPD Manchester, but tonight I'm here in my drawing capacity. So most of the time you're not going to see me.
Thanks, Rachel. We'll be watching progress with the sketchnoting. And I think we've also got Emma with us. Emma, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, yeah, I'm Emma. I'm the membership engagement lead for the branch, and I'm here as an attendee to learn along with everyone else.
Lovely, thank you. So great to have everyone with us. So let's move on to the main topic. We might have a few people that join us. Just to remind everyone that we are recording the session. We won't be recording the breakout discussions, but we will be recording the main session so that people who couldn't attend can have a look, and so that you can all go back and have a look as well. So just bear that in mind in the discussions and the information that you're sharing. I think we are all very familiar now with Zoom. If anybody needs anything, feel free to put something in the chat. We will be generating some discussion in the chat as we go through the evening. But yeah, don't hesitate if you need any help, but keep yourself on mute whilst you're not speaking, because it will really help us with voice levels, etc. So the session tonight is all about change, and we've got Rebecca and we've got Dave Harrison with us as well. So basically, I think this is a really interesting topic at the moment. I know when I worked as a global change manager in a large organisation, and change is always challenging. I think it's very hard to get it right. I think there's always great learning from it. But I think the whole thing around how do you take people with you? How do you actually help people on that journey is never more important. You know, we know that people are dealing with so much change at the moment at work and at home, and that can be quite overwhelming. So it's a really great topic. Dave Harrison is the managing director and the founder of Cocreation, and I think the name says everything about his approach to how he does things. Rebecca's a chartered psychologist, and she's really interested in the whole change piece and has been doing a lot of research around it. So I'll hand over to them to just introduce themselves, and then we'll move into the session. We will be doing some breakouts, so feel free if people want to pop the cameras off, that's fine. It would be great if you could pop your cameras on while you're in your groups in the breakouts if possible. So I'll hand over to Dave first to introduce himself.
Thank you, Liz. Great to be here, and great to see so many people as well, especially when it's going into your evening. But I hope what we're going to do is going to get a lot out today to sort of maybe challenge some of your thinking, to add to your thinking as well. So co-creation, who are we? So we basically co-create cultures that inspire people to optimize their strengths and deliver outstanding results. And within that, we're very much a strong focus on strengths and what people can bring to the party. It's not just about what they're good at, but what they're energized by. So how can they be energized every day in what they do, and how can they deliver results through that? So we have various values. We have the power of the positive mindset. So we do a lot of mindsets and working within individuals and a team's mindset. We talk about the strength of individuality. So that's about being inclusive. And also the power of the community, and that's a really big thing. So how as a community can we share, how can we sort of deliver the results that we need to do, and how can we support one another? And then it's also about leaving a legacy. So it's about how can we help organizations do this for themselves as well, not just about what we can do for them, but how can they do this? And that's part of what tonight's about as well, is so can you take some of the learning into your own respective organizations? So we cover 4 areas: change management, which is obviously today's topic, leadership development, team effectiveness, and coaching. So I'll hand over to Rebecca so she can do an introduction of herself as well.
Thanks, Dave. So let me tell you a little bit about me. So I'm a chartered psychologist, as Liz said, and been working in the field 20 years. But I got really passionate about positive psychology about 12 years ago. I was introduced to this tool called Strengthscope, and I thought, oh, this looks a really good psychometric, like all the other psychometrics. But then actually really got into it and realized that this is actually taking your whole worldview and putting it on sideways. It's a 90-degree turn on how you view things, and really started getting very passionate about the benefits of it and what it really brings people. So I've been working independently for about 11 years now, and really had the opportunity to really go where my passion is and go where my energy is. and very lucky to be working with Co-Creation and Dave, who enables us all to be our best versions of ourselves. So I'm really excited to share what I'm going to be showing you today, which, funnily enough, actually came out of ideas from pre-pandemic. And I was going to do a bit of a launch and everything just before we went into the pandemic. So we've been doing a bit of test and learning in a very live environment. So that's a bit about me, but let's share the slides. You will all have access to these slides, by the way, because we're going to be using them in the breakout. So let me talk a bit about where this has come from. So this is the reason I started looking at change was because I've been working a lot in the strengths field and thinking a lot of the models that I had been using weren't really meeting and weren't really reflecting the environments that we were operating in. Now this is pre-pandemic and became even more true during the pandemic, where we see this level of uncertainty, a huge kind of, the moving goalposts, the changing targets, and never mind the technological advancements and everything we had to learn last year, from Zoom to Teams to doing everything online it's just been a really, really fast pace. And one of the things that really got me thinking was, why do we assume that change is linear? Why do we look at things in this linear fashion? And almost kind of, when I watched the film Tenet recently, I went, that's it. That's how I think change isn't linear. I don't think we're using a linear structure to help us understand and structure our world, but actually change and time isn't like that for us. It's very organic. It's very kind of like a whirlwind. The second thing that we saw really in the pandemic were things like that response to change. So how we saw people just go, right, what's really important here? How do we look after each other? How do we build communities? How do we be creative? How do we make the most of these opportunities? And a real kind of survival and approach, in the sense of a real positive survival approach. What's really important to us now, and how do we make the most of that? And actually some of these other things that we've been worrying about all the time, let's just let go of those. And so we really saw this kind of much more mindful and ethical and conscious leadership approach, and also with each other as well. So all this brought around a lot of thinking for me, and then just kind of cemented my thinking over the last couple of years around change models. So I studied change models, right, donkey's years ago now, in my original degree back in kind of 96, and then again when I did my master's back in 2000. And my favourite one was Kotter. I used Kotter a lot at the time, and obviously Kubler-Ross as well. You'll all be familiar with that one. But when I started looking at these change models 2 years ago, going, right, okay, what can I use in a strengths-based environment? I'm using strengths, we're having kind of strengths-based conversations. There must be something that I can use. And I looked through all these different models and just went, that just none of these really fit the need. None of these fit what we need to do. This is deeply frustrating. And it was quite interesting. I did talk to a couple of people who really lead in this area of kind of strengths and positive psychology. And I said, oh, there must be a model out there that meets. And they said, well, no, it's just all the methodology that comes together. And a couple of people said, oh, have you seen Kotter's update? And interestingly enough, someone recently said, oh, have you seen the lean update, the lean UX update as well? But I'm still going, these are all linear. These are all cyclical. They're all about step 1, step 2, step 3. And actually, that's not our environment. We can't do things in a linear way. The second thing that was, I also have an original background in project management donkey's years ago. And what you see a lot of models doing is assuming that there's dedicated resources, dedicated teams, and actually, and it's really, really obvious from the pandemic, we all own change. We're all part of that. It's about it being part of everybody's job. And if you've come across kind of lean methodology, you'll know that that's a big part of that methodology as well. So for me, it's about how can we find change that is collective and a community movement with joint accountability, rather than that kind of hero leadership or figurehead type approach. And then the final bit, which is really important to me, was I just kind of was thinking, well, how come all these models talk about deficit so much? They all talk about, maybe not so much the appreciative inquiry ones and the dialogic ones there, but a lot of them focus on what we're losing and how we cope with that loss and processing that loss. And it's a real heavy emphasis on deficit and almost like an assumption that most people are going to be quite resistant to change. And I know from neuropsychology that we like things to be familiar because it's safe. But actually, when you look at how we are as human beings, we are constantly evolving, we're constantly creating, and we're constantly wanting to learn and grow. So why don't we make the assumption, and this is what positive psychology does, of course, make the assumption that that's our zone, that's the zone we want to be in, and more than the deficit zone, and actually we naturally trend toward that zone. So this is where this came from, was kind of my deep reflections around this a couple of years ago. And I took these thoughts to the co-creation team and said, you know, where are you at with this thinking? And we did a lot of exploration, all pre-pandemic, which I find funny, a lot of exploration around those principles. And we've come up with a different approach. Now, I will just position this, that this is almost like a collection. This is, these are all the great ideas that we see in positive psychology brought together, because what I saw were different people in different organizations picking off, oh, we want to do strengths-based leadership, or we want to encourage growth mindset. But actually, why don't you bring all these things together? So that's what we're doing today. So what I'm going to do in a little bit of a whirlwind tour of what we've created. And I really hope that this is something that you can take away and use. That's, you know, the intention today is, here are some great models and theories and tools, a lot of which is out there. Why don't you take them away and use these? And we're going to work on a case study to really give you an opportunity to discuss it and share experiences and just do a bit of reflection, that reflective learning piece that really helps us in our learning phase. So this is not linear, this model. You can see there's 6 parts to it. I will work around it, obviously, in a particular order, but what the emphasis is that you are doing aspects of all of this. It's not doing one before the other. You've got something covering off everything all the time. So let's focus on purpose first off, because purpose was a big part of where I started with this model. And really, because I'd picked up Martin Seligman's PERMA model of well-being. So that stands for kind of those positive emotions. So feeling good is important, and engagement and relationships and meaning. So it was the meaning piece I picked up. And I was doing a lot of research around, why is that so important to us? Why is having a purposeful existence so important to us? And actually, how do we translate that into an individual level, to a team level, and an organization level? Because my other issue with some of these change models is they're either individual or organizational. Actually, why are they not all of that? So from my perspective, it's really about, how do we create that positive vision based on collective goals, you know, reframing challenges and opportunities, and really helping individuals understand how their meaning links to the team's purpose and meaning, links to the organization's purpose and meaning. So just take a moment to reflect, and feel free to share in chat about how you might help others to find meaning and purpose. So I'll give a very brief example, just to try and bring this to life a little bit for you. So I was working with a leadership team recently who are in a kind of publications and knowledge distribution type zone. And we worked a lot on, you know, what do they stand for? Who are they? You know, what's their brand visibility and personal brand? So they were looking at their essence, their proposition, and obviously strengths and values as part of that, but really getting a sense of, what is my mission and how does this relate to the mission of the company? And using exercises to explore that in a group coaching environment, that was, but that's just an example of how you can do that. So that's a bit about purpose. Dave, if any questions come in on the chat, if you just jump in with them as we go, that would be great. And feel free to do ask, although there will be more opportunity for questions later as well. So let's talk about the second area, being human-centric. So this was more of an inkling pre-pandemic. This was more about how come decisions and actions tend to be quite financially driven. And a lot of the research from positive psychology looks at that piece between, if you've got engaged people who are playing to their strengths, you get better service in terms of kind of what customers experience, and actually that improves the bottom line. So actually, if we make decisions and actions which are focused around what's going on for people, that are collaborative and involving of those who are impacted, then actually surely those are going to be better decisions for the business, because you don't have a business without people. So this is where that was coming from. And for me, kind of what was really interesting to see during the pandemic is how this has become really, really important. And you'll see a trend in human-centric leadership and a lot of talk around that. Conscious leadership or mindful leadership is another kind of tone of voice in this. So that's, you know, for example, let me bring it to life a little bit. So I'm currently working with well, I'm working with a couple of different software technology companies, but one of them that we've been working with, we started early in the year, and all of their leaders went through a 360 type process where they were looking at what are they energized by, but principally what is their impact, and how do they make, you know, what do they need to adjust to be a stronger leader, a more engaging leader? How are they being more focused on their people in their leadership style to enable the organisation to deliver results? So hopefully that helps bring it to life a little bit. A lot of this is around developing self-awareness and that emotional intelligence piece. Okay. So let me take you through a third principle or third part of the model. Now, this comes directly from a lot of the work I was doing initially with Strengths, where I was using it in originally a recruitment context rather than a development context, interestingly, because we were looking at how do you help people understand what they can do in a role and help them understand how they can play to their strengths or their characteristics or their qualities, whatever you care to call it, and make the most of themselves in the role. And what was interesting was at the same time as focusing on this outcomes piece. So it's very much about, you know, is the outcome of what they're doing the appropriate outcome, and the impact they're having the appropriate impact, not how are they doing it. So removing from a lot of that recruitment process at the time, and this was with an ombudsman, we removed all the detail around all those behavioural indicators, which I know for some of you will fill you with horror that we removed behavioural indicators. What we replaced it with was, this is the impact and outcome. So we had impact and outcome indicators. And are you energized by those? So we could understand and embrace the fact that in this particular circumstance for the ombudsman, people who are dealing with complaints will do it in different ways, playing to their strengths, but they still have the best outcome and they have equivalent outcomes. So that is a really big step. It sounds really simple, but it's a really big step to help leaders and teams get to the point where they go, actually, how someone does something is not as important as the impact and outcome they're having. So if the impact and outcome needs to include satisfied, engaged people, then that includes that. You don't lose that bit. It's not just about setting KPIs, which are just about money and deliverables. It's a broad interpretation of the word outcomes, but you don't describe the step-by-step of what they're doing. Other influences here for me have been in more recent years, you know, Matthew Syed's book around cognitive diversity was fascinating, and looking at how we build more diverse teams. So it's been an interesting kind of segue of, oh, look what's going on in the diversity and inclusion arena. And actually this really fits with what we're looking at here. So that's a bit about outcomes. So let's take a look at working collectively and inclusively. Now, this is a lot of where I started. So the model in the middle is a Strengthscope model. It is a model of strengths. There are a number of different tools in the market. This is one that's developed more in the European market, although I know it's been translated, but for me, it had more accessibility. It's also much more work-based than a lot of the other tools that are around, and quite simple. I'm all for simplicity. I'm all about kind of boiling it down to things that you can just use. I'm quite a pragmatic type of person. And, you know, what we look at here is how do we build trust and positive and collective relationships that work well together. And it's not about being similar. It's about understanding why we're different and how we can use that. So, and understanding, you know, what helps us, what are we energized by, and how do we make the most of that at work? So rather than always focusing on being this all-rounder, it's about going, oh, these are the things that really energize me, and I'm going to talk about it so I can work with people who are energized by different things, and we can work together and actually make something stronger. You know, it's that whole team is that better than the sum of its parts piece. But this is a really kind of useful approach to that. You'll no doubt realise that Amy Edmondson's work around psychological safety is an important part of this, because it's about creating those environments where you can have that conversation and go, oh, okay, we're disagreeing here, but that's okay. This is all about creating something better. What is this about? You know, that we can speak up without fear of retribution or punishment in any way. So this is part of that. Another model that was a strong influence here is Lencioni, of course, and his 5 dysfunctions of a team and what he looks at there. So that particularly that bit around building trust, because building trust is about knowing each other better, so you understand why you're different and how you can work with that, rather than thinking, oh, you know, I just want to kind of do this over here, and I don't like it, someone challenges me. It's about getting into that place where you feel self-confident in who you are and comfortable with challenge, and comfortable challenging others as well, which he tends to label healthy conflict. Just very briefly then, I've been using this a lot in team building in recent months, particularly with a couple of different instances of one housing association and a property association, where really it's about, at that very basic level, what energizes me and how am I similar to you and how am I different and how do we make more of that? So it's just a really effective way of doing that openness and building trust. So let's talk a bit about adaptability. So this has come from me starting to work in the tech sector a few years ago and stumbling into the agile methodology for software development and going, oh, right, hang on a moment, this is really interesting, because they view change as iterative. They view things that you don't have a beginning, middle and end. It's all about test and learn, test and learn. What is it we're doing next? And what have we learned from that? And I really started getting into this, you know, and there's other aspects like, you know, the servant leader piece, and teams are grouped around purpose. And it was really, I was thinking, well, this software development methodology is so interesting. Why is it not being used more broadly? So anyway, this is what's kind of the inspiration here. And you know, if you're interested, Google the Agile Software Development Manifesto. It's fascinating and will make a lot of connections for you. You know, let's borrow great thinking from elsewhere. There's also things like the design thinking as well. That's been a recent kind of area I've been stumbling into and bringing into thinking here. But this is all about creating structures and teams and processes that are flexible, that have that capacity to change, that we're not thinking, right, we've put the line in the sand and that's it. That's our structure. That's what we're doing. Because actually, I've been working with one company this year who, you know, we've been trying to design a process to help with performance conversations and development conversations, and they keep going, oh, no, we can't quite do that yet because we're just going to, and it's always about restructuring. And it's actually, you need to view this as organic, that we'll start with something and we'll develop it as we go, because that is, you know, because what we create today is not going to be right for next year anyway, because by the time we get there, something else will have changed. So it's all about kind of being in that in that zone of looking at that structure. And then finally is the L, the bit that, you know, for all of us who work in the kind of HR field absolutely love, this kind of learning piece. And it will be no surprise to you that the growth mindset is the big thing here for me. And it was just the, you know, the stumble across and going, this absolutely is a fundamental part of how we grow and change as human beings, and feel okay about, you know, making mistakes and actually seeing that as such. It's all about improvement. It's all about kind of that again, that test and learn piece, but building people's confidence about this. So also coming across a tool called Engage, which helps people understand where is their mindset, what are their self-limiting beliefs, what barriers are they putting in place that means that that's stopping their learning. So I'm going to stop talking through the model there, because I could talk about it a lot. As you probably realise, I've been thinking about this for a couple of years, and occasionally wake up in the middle of the night adding a new bit into it, which I know amuses my colleagues, but that's kind of how my creative brain works. So this is the model in its sum. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Dave to introduce the exercise. And I think what I might do is just take the, no, I'll leave the screen up because it's got the instructions on it, so that'll help you. But what you will have is access to this slide deck. I'll pop that in the chat so you can work on the slide deck. Okay. Any questions that have come in the meantime, Dave? Sorry, I meant to just pause and ask that.
No specific questions, more about people adding to the conversation, providing names of books.
Oh, fabulous.
And about how we found things like the Agile Manifesto really useful, and about how it's really important. Jane Hansen said about the Human Workplace by Andy Swan is a great read as well. So, you know, if you've not had a look in the chat, it might be worthwhile just having a look in there to see if there's any.
I'm a magpie for ideas.
Ideas that might be useful.
Ah, okay. Thank you very much for your contributions. That's going to be really helpful, because as per what I've been talking about, you'll realise that this is an organic changing model. So we're constantly building it and adding to it. So Dave, do you want to talk the people through what we're going to be doing in terms of the breakout? Yeah, please. And if you change on to the next slide, that'd be fantastic. So this is a case study, and you will have access to this in the slide deck. So you'll have access to the Google Docs, and I think Rebecca's going to put the link in a moment when we get to it in the chat, so you can go straight to it. So this is semi-real life as well. So we're not going to name any companies, but we'll call it TechFit. TechFit is they work in digital world. They basically provide support and consultancy to organizations about their own digital strategy. How can they take it forward, and how can they upskill their internal capability to manage it for themselves as well, rather than relying upon the TechFit organization. The head office is in the UK and has offices globally. They've grown quite exponentially already to 500 people, which obviously for some organizations that might not seem that large, but from a startup organization, that's been quite vast in the last few years. However, it's going to grow exponentially even further by tenfold over the next 3 years to 5,000 employees. So expansion is really part of their plan and their strategy. They're going to do this through two main ways. It's going to be both acquisition of small or existing tech companies, but also organic growth as well from that perspective. So you've got all these different organizations coming into one organization. Teams are grouped by product of up to 25 people. So there's no more than 25 people in any one particular team. And it's led by a product leader who reports directly into the CEO. And just so you know, at this moment in time, the CEO had roughly about 26 people reporting into them, which is obviously a very high number. And that's going to grow exponentially to about 40 to 45 people as it stands. The support teams, things like HR, finance, they work across the company. Obviously, with COVID over the last 18 months, you've seen some organizations where their digital strategy has been catapulted 8 years ahead of where they intended to be at this moment in time. So obviously, that's also creating a real demand for their services and obviously helping promote their growth as well for their services.
However, with that growth, there comes some teething problems. The CEO and founder, their values are being lost in rapid growth with negative impact on customers. The workforce are highly talented, as you can appreciate. They're motivated and driven, but under pressure due to the pace and increasing demands that they're experiencing from this growth. And also the recruitment challenges. I mean, if you're in an organisation now trying to recruit, you'll know that it's very difficult to. There's obviously there's a lot of people resigning at this moment in time, and obviously keeping skills is really difficult. The product leaders are protective of their teams as well and their talent. So sharing talent across the different teams is something that they're really struggling with as well. And at the board level, there's a clash of priorities. There's the priority of growth and financial reward versus the people and culture. So how do you bring this together? So what we're going to do is going to look at answer some questions around this case study. You don't have to remember all the facts because you will have access to them. So what you're going to do, we're going to break into breakout groups of about 6 to 7 people. And what we want you to do is, in your group, nominate a spokesperson to capture the key outputs. Now, on the Google Docs, you'll see that when you get put into a room, you'll get either in room 1, breakout room 1, or breakout room 2. What we'd like you to do is go to the slide that has your breakout number on and capture your notes on that slide. So each room will have their own individual slide that they can capture the notes on. And what we want you to do is discuss how you would use the principles and tools in FHOCAL that Rebecca's just talked about to help TechFit achieve their growth plans. Now, there are 3 questions there. In 25 minutes, that's a lot to cover. So what we'd like you to do is just gravitate towards the questions that really do interest you, maybe drawing on your own experiences better, or actually it's something that you've got a passion for or some ideas that you'd like to share. So don't worry if you don't do all 3 questions, just answer the questions that you want to. We're adults at the end of the day. And what we want to do is, there's no right or wrong answers. This is an opportunity for you to share your experiences, the views, and help you explore. And what we'll do is when we'll come back into this main virtual room, we'll start sharing some of the outputs from that session as well. Okay, so I believe that the breakout rooms are being set up at the moment, and you'll get an invite to join them. And also in the rooms, there'll be someone from the CIPD or myself and Rebecca as well.
Yeah, so thanks for introducing that, Dave. So I'm going to invite you to your room shortly. You might want to just nominate one person in each group to take the notes so that they can capture everything on the Google slides. Rebecca's popped the link there into the chat, so everyone should be able to access that. But if anyone has any problems, pop a note in the chat and we'll answer those. So we're going to send you off into these breakout now for about 25 minutes. Call for assistance if you need anything, and we'll come and sort you out. So enjoy, everyone. Dave, should I hand over to you?
Say again, sorry, Liz.
I just hand back over to you, Dave. We've got everybody back now, I think.
Yeah, okay. Well, we had great discussions in our room, I have to say. So, but let's start with group 1. What I'd like you to do, if the spokesperson, if they're happy, if they're able to share their screen. And
I can share the screen, Dave. I'll do that.
Okay, you do that, Rebecca. That'd be, yeah, if you want to drive that forward, that'd be great. Thank you.
There you go. So you should be able to see group 1 there.
Yeah, if we can. So who's in group 1 that would like to talk us through that?
I think it's me. Hi, everyone. So I'll just talk you through what we've come up with. So we focused on the 3rd question, which was how would you help them improve employee experience as they expand? So in terms, we kind of worked through the models statistically.
Helen, sorry to interrupt. We're really having problems with your sound.
When the slide is very organised, but I guess that's a topic for another day, I guess. So focus about communicating the change. Why? What's the vision? Sharing the vision. Yeah. Well, do you know if my video off? That might help. Is that better, Liz?
Yeah, it's slightly better with the video off, Helen.
No, I think my sound's rubbish. Okay. Shall I go for it, and then Jane might have to take over, depending.
Go for it, yeah.
So the focus, communicating the change, why, what's the vision, sharing the vision, doing a bit of a cultural audit. We were talking about, in my organisation, we're talking about doing stay interviews. So why do people stay?
as opposed to doing exit interviews. Thinking about what motivates people to stay, what do people really love about working for us, so really get people to focus on the meaning and how almost they're emotionally attached to the organisation. From a human-centric perspective, we talked about passion, being committed to the vision and values, and also making it okay for people to leave. We were talking about that sometimes when people leave an organisation, it can be that they're under a bit of a cloud, or it can feel that the organisation takes it quite personally. But if the organisation is going in a direction that the person doesn't feel comfortable with, then we need to make it okay that that's fine, and maybe they may come back in a couple of years, so they may bounce back. And some engagement across the organisation to get buy-in. In terms of outcomes, we talked about a working group for wider engagement, to think really wild and creative. What would you like to work here? What would you like to make it feel like? And then explore the possibilities. So kind of work backwards. What is the dream? And then kind of, right, okay, what can we actually do here? In terms of collaboration, it's things like team building events, bringing new teams together, finding out what people motivates them, create a more flexible team to maintain the culture, think of new ways to recruit, to promote a diverse and inclusive recruitment. So the example I gave was that Mercedes F1 team have gone outside their traditional areas of recruitment, same university, same degree, to kind of get different ideas into the business. So, and they're pretty successful. Sorry, that's one of my passions apart from L&D. Adaptable then. Challenge the ways of working and processes and make it okay for people to do that. And that's your psychological safety, really, so that people can kind of speak up. And also, what they introduce at work may not work, and appreciate it's okay to revisit and change and go back. So there's no kind of shame, if that's the right word, or harm in kind of saying, I don't know, or do you know what, we've done that, but it doesn't quite work. So people know it's okay. And we left learning blank because then I said it's my specialist subject. So now I feel under a lot of pressure to say something really profound. So with this one, I think it's very much getting people to think about what learning is, and also being able to take learning as and when they need it, as opposed to thinking about learning as being that thing that they turn up for, which is a one-day workshop or a 3-hour workshop or whatever it is, but creating resources that are available at the point of need, and people access them when they need it in a variety of ways. Yeah, that's something I'm quite passionate about because I'm working on that at the moment.
Because people always talk about, oh, I haven't got time to learn, but actually seeing it as part of that, actually it's a tool to enable you to do your job at the time that you need to do it. So
it's like that is the learning in the flow of work, isn't it, Rebecca? Which is the kind of hot topic at the moment. Okay, and there is the findings of the Group 1 jury.
Thank you, Helen. That's been really useful. Thank you very much. Okay, Rebecca, would you like to go on to Group 2? So with Group 2, whoever the spokesperson is, if you can just, obviously quite a lot was covered by Helen. So if there's anything on your slide that, hasn't been covered that you'd like to maybe draw out that, that hasn't already been mentioned, that'd be great, especially if it's on the same topic. So
different question for us. So it's Anwen. So Helen, girl after your own heart, F1 Mercedes team fan too. But I haven't woven any into this at all, so we didn't discuss that, but we can come back to it. So we looked at this, how to support the CEO and the board change. And what kind of one of the first areas we looked at was to see that kind of the interest of that kind of divergence of seeing growth and profit and people and culture almost being separate, and helping them to recognise actually you need all of that working together. You need the people and culture to enable the growth and the financial success of the organisation. So there's a mindset piece to do with the CEO there, and the board, obviously. So looking at the values piece, this is the other area we looked at. And actually, is it that they're struggling with the values now because they're not relevant anymore, they need to evolve, is that something that they need to look at in terms of how they position that for the purpose of the organisation? And what's the ripple effect of that with the rest of the organisation as well? Is everybody in the same place on those values, and how that should work? We then looked at measure of the impacts and looking at the strengths and experiences in the company and how they can continue to work together. And that kind of crossed over with working collectively and identifying the fact that there's going to be huge problems if the values, or the behaviours within the organisation aren't helping them to work in the right way. So if you've got 25 or up to 50 at some point, potentially teams competing and that's how it's being driven, then how do you expect them to work collectively? So it's helping them to understand what, how do they position that and how do they get that into the right place, but also that there might be a time now for the organisation to look at its structure. The CEO can't have 49 direct reports, and for that to be a good learning and leadership experience, so that has to be looked at, and that's where we should be supporting them to get that right. And you need to be kinder to people by giving them a line manager, and having somebody spread across so many means that that's not going to happen. So really looking at where HR plays a role in that as well. How do we upscale the HR function to make sure that it's really supporting the values and the cultural change that the organisation's needing to continue that success? And looking at that adaptability. So yes, putting a bit more structure in, making sure people have got line managers, but ensuring that there's still a level of flexibility in there. So although we want to put a bit more HR support in there, making sure that's not kind of getting in the way of things, more of a principles based rather than policy based. So those are the areas that we thought the CEO and board would need some help with first.
Thank you, Andrew. So a bit of a mixture of the hard and soft elements of change. Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to pull out there, Rebecca? Anything?
No, I think it's particularly important what you were saying about enabling the board to make that connection between the growth, to achieve the growth, the people and culture help you to achieve the growth, and to have those principles as part of that, rather than a strict structure is key in what you're talking about there.
Thank you.
And thank you to
thank you.
Is it Joe taking the notes as well? Thank you.
So this is on to group 3. So I think Emma, are you happy to pick this up?
Fine. Hopefully my internet connection will let me go all the way through. So I'd say we focus mainly probably on focus on purpose and meaning, being human-centric, and working collectively and inclusively. So I think some things obviously that we touched on in our conversation were covered by group 1, but we did, I think, spend a fair amount of time talking about communication and talking about values. So the importance of having open communication around the change, and particularly obviously if you're merging the companies and you've got new employees coming in as well, making sure they're all united around the why. And with that, then also the importance of leadership actually being a unified front, being accessible, being available, to actually have conversations with the employees, making sure the employees have a voice and are as involved and connected with the change process as they can be. Sort of taking that communication part a step further, we did of course talk about possibility of running engagement surveys, pulse surveys, even employee life cycle surveys, as well as things like town hall meetings, informal drop-ins where the leadership team would be accessible, and obviously also how so much of this could become a lot more complicated if you've got teams working remotely, and how you can bring them together. And that leads into sort of a larger conversation we had then around the values of the company. So the values of the two companies as they're merging, are they similar enough? Are the cultures aligned? What changes need to be made there, so that people do feel as though they're part of that one organization? And then of course all of that led very nicely into a conversation around diversity and inclusion, and obviously there was that part around recruitment as well, but it goes throughout the different aspects of change, because at the end of the day you're always having to consider where the employees are coming from, what their feelings are, as somebody said, it's not about just sort of sending some generic cold kind of communication. There does need to be proper conversation there, and also that awareness, you know, of bias creeping in that would also be affecting how people looked at the changes or responded to the changes, and making sure that there was actually real action that supported what was being said. And I think I've missed one point as well. I
think what that triggers in my head, interestingly, is that communication piece you're talking there about, that coming together with not assuming how someone is going to react to a new idea or a new way you're going to structure something, or a new policy or a new move, or not making those assumptions. So actually having really open communications around those, around the changes, and saying how are you experiencing this, what's going on for you. So I love your focus on communication. I always say that's the bit that, you know, if your communication is poor, actually everything else falls down. It's an absolute linchpin, isn't it?
And I think it also then is kind of reflected back in the concept of change also being personal.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't going to go well unless all the employees are actually on board.
Yeah. I had a really, well, you probably heard it loads of times, the phrase last year was, we're all in this storm together, but our boats are all very different.
Right.
And it's true. It's kind of, you can't assume that your boat, you know, someone else's boat is like your boat navigating this storm. So yeah, it's about conversations and communication. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Rebecca. So can we go into, if you're happy to go into group 4, and if group 4 can pull out anything that hasn't already been covered, that'd be great. Who's speaking for group 4? Does anybody recognise this slide?
Yes, I think it might be me.
You did all 3 questions.
Sorry, I think it might be me. So I think quite a lot of it's been said. We took quite a broad brushstroke attitude towards this, and we picked out the things that we felt were important. So I think the only thing that we can probably add to that is specifically just going on from the point that's been made previously about effectively the territorialness, the protectiveness of the existing teams, and how they want to recruit people into their teams for their skills. And that actually, if you're looking at a slightly different agile or adaptable structure, you might be able to bring people in on the basis of the company and its revised purposes and values, which we've already made an assumption will happen, so that those people will be working for the company as opposed to specifically for those teams. And that in an agile working environment, you are probably looking at that person working, you know, in a specific team and then moving on to a different team. So I think all the other points have probably been covered. So I don't want to go into great detail, but happy to do so if there's anything on there that doesn't make sense. And apologies, because there is a couple of spelling mistakes, because I was still typing when we had to leave the breakout room.
It's all right. Listen, you don't lose any points for spelling or grammar when we're taking notes in this real setting and what have you. And I noticed there's a few of mine as well, so we can get that ourselves off with that.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca,
is there anything that you'd like to add to that, or before we go on to
no, it just connects into kind of something I was going to, because I was facilitating the fifth group, but that piece around the movement and the tackling that protectiveness piece is really key for this organisation's growth. And understand how you know, so this is obviously based on a couple of 2 or 3 different clients we're working with. It's a bit of a meld. But I understand well how that's formed, because when you rapidly grow, you just add another team who's doing another thing. But actually, you know, how is that's not going to work for you in that growth plan. So
that moves quite nice into yours, then, I presume, Rebecca.
Yeah. So apologies to my group that yeah, they got me sat there going, what do you think then? So we were focusing on that last question. So what else did we have that's not been mentioned? Again, we talked a lot about things like discovery workshops. We had some interesting things coming in here around actually reviewing things like staff contracts in a more human way, rather than actually what does the business need, actually what does your contract look like in terms of remote working practices, and actually having that human angle on what things like contracts. We talked about actually the outcomes and measurements being driven by the employees rather than from the top. So rather than, right, this is we need to achieve X sales or X profit or this KPI, actually going, right, what's important to you, what outcome do you want to see, and actually using that as the measure. So really kind of coming up from that kind of employees going, you know what, it's really important to me that my customers are 110% satisfied, and that I'm seeing that coming back through, and we're seeing a low, I'm not getting lots of complaints. So actually using that as the measures, the outcome measures. We talked also about having this conversation, help and actually encouraging and enabling people to reflect on what is, their life, their lifestyle, and how that fits with their, how their role fits with that, to try and tackle this issue around the Great Resignation. And as part of that, similar to what we were saying earlier, that in terms of the stay interviews, the stay and thrive conversations rather than exit conversations. And actually making it's okay that you might not be here for the long term. This might not, you might want to move into a different organisations. That's okay. Let's have an open conversation about what is available for you here. And that's about kind of it in terms of kind of without wanting to duplicate what everyone else is doing.
Thank you, Rebecca. And one thing that resonated to me for there is it's been talked about for a while, but how some organisations are starting to move over to the 4-day working week to allow for some of this sort of lifestyle that people want to have. But also there was one organisation that's gone to 4 days, but there's another organisation that says actually we might phase it in. We might say actually work half an hour longer each day so you can finish early on a Friday, but actually over time they might adapt it. And I think that's going back to what we said before. It's not always the final solution, is it? It will evolve and it will place. I think that's been said about hybrid working as well in the present sort of situation as well. Yeah. So is that all the groups? Can I just confirm? Everyone's right. Okay. So back over to you then.
Right. So I'm just going to wrap up with one kind of final slide, really, just to bring it back together and just you use this model. I've shared with you what's in it. It brings together, very principles, methods, theories that you have access to. You can just Google and find a lot of the things that I've mentioned, and use these things from the field of positive psychology. Co-create those cultures that help people have that positive attitude about change, because it's there, but it's all about mindset. It's all about helping people build that mindset rather than that kind of defensive blaming zone. And in doing that does enable people to be more resourceful, because they're going, okay, what's going on for here? How do I tap into someone who's got that? Or so-and-so over there's got strengths in that. Yeah, let's work with them. So it really enables teams and people to work at pace and be resourceful in that, when we are, stripped of resource in a lot of places, in that kind of constantly changing, organic, fast-moving world that we live in now. And that's, that is our reality. It's not going to slow down. And so this is kind of my message really to you, and my gift to you, and hoping that in your influence that you can take these principles and go and help create positive change in your organizations. So open to any other questions.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if anyone has anything. We've got a couple of minutes, so feel free to either pop it in the chat or unmute yourselves and ask if you've got anything that's come up through the breakout, or anything that you're now reflecting on that you'd like to take this opportunity to ask Rebecca and Dave while we've got them with us.
Just nice to see some of the real life experiences that people are putting in the chat about how they're transitioning into things like the 4-day working week, but it's not like they're doing it in steps,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is that whole thing that you said, Dave, it's not always a final solution, is it? It's about, people are making that change. And again, I know some organisations are starting to think about that really differently now. Some are making the journey much quicker than others.
Yeah. I've got people in my team who, they're transitioning over to retiring at some stage. It's a bit fluid and we're working with it, keep on the communication, and keep on talking about it and what that means to them. Depends on what day, sometimes that might change.
Absolutely. Any final questions? Anyone want to ask a final question? Okay, well, everyone's been very, very quiet and shy. I wonder whether we might take this opportunity just to move over and have a look at Rachel's sketch note of the session. Rachel, do you want to just tell us what you've captured?
Okay, well, please go to Speaker View by going to the top right hand corner of your page and just clicking on there, and that will bring up my screen, and you'll be able to see what I've been drawing. I have to say, I must remember in future not to offer to sketchnote case studies. Oh, when they've got a lot of group work, it's extremely hard. But I love that opening image of the sort of change, and so I've tried to capture just a flavour of that. And then I've got the model here with focus and being human-centric and measures, and more on what and less on how, and building. I've got a set of bricks building trust going on there, and I'm particularly keen on the growth and the floweriness coming out of that person's head. And then over on here, this is where I need to add in a little bit more colour, discussions from the case study and all sorts of things coming out here, from things like it's okay to leave, through to things like the importance of employee voice, and employees being driving the identification of outcomes, and a bit of reflection on lifestyles going on there.
Brilliant. Okay, well, we look forward to seeing the final version. Incredibly hard to capture all of that while you're working live, and to be drawing and capturing things in words as well. So we will share that afterwards so that everyone can have a look at that. So thanks again for doing that, Rachel. That's great. So just a couple of things that I'm going to say to wrap up. Firstly, huge thank you to Rebecca and to Dave. I know they put a lot of work and thinking into, first of all the work Rebecca's done on designing the model, which we really appreciate, but then also just in thinking about how to make this session interactive and useful for everyone. So thank you, both of you. I know that we are going to be posting the materials on the website for people to access, so you'll have all of those. I guess the session's got me thinking about some of the other things we've been doing in the OD group over the last 6 to 12 months. And, the whole piece around being human-centric, around really thinking about individuals and engaging in dialogue. So, there just isn't a one-size-fits-all. And actually, if we can have the communication lines open and we can be speaking to people about what they want, how we can work most effectively with them, then that actually goes a long way. It came into the ethical leadership, it came into our thinking about compassionate cultures and our work that we did on equality and diversion as well. So a lot of common themes coming out here, even though we're looking at slightly different topics. So the next session that we've got from the OD group, we've got 2 events coming up in the first quarter of next year. The first one will be looking at compassionate cultures again, and the second one will be looking at OD careers. So we know that people tend to have quite interesting journeys into OD, and it's not always very linear. So we've got some people that will be coming and talking to you about those. They're not advertised yet, so watch out on the website for those. The first one will be happening in February. In terms of other events that we've got from Manchester, we have our next HR book club happening on the 7th of December. And we've got Campbell McPherson, the author of The Power to Change, coming to talk to us. So that might be of particular interest to people in this group, because it will be looking at change again. So if you can, go onto our Eventbrite page and register for that on the 7th of December if you can. You will all be getting a survey from tonight, so if you can, take a few minutes to fill it in. We always really like to have your feedback. If anyone has any ideas of topics you'd like us to cover for the OD group, practice that you want to share. You know, if you're doing some really good things in your organisation, we really love to share that best practice. Or if there are things that you're struggling with that you'd like us to spend a bit of time exploring in this OD group as well, please let us know and we'll do our best to cover those things. So feel free to get in contact with me direct. It's liz@lizneedham.com. I will just post my contact details into the chat in a moment, or feel free to get in contact with us through the CIPD branch. So go and have a lovely rest of your evening, everybody. Thanks again, particularly to Rebecca and to Dave, and I do hope that you found the time with us this evening interesting. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
It's been great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us.
Thanks both.